It was a cold Sunday morning in Paris. October 19, 2025. The clock outside the Louvre Museum showed 9:28 a.m. Tourists were gathering near the glass pyramid entrance, their breaths visible in the autumn air. The sound of the city mixed with the soft hum of the Seine River. Boats glided by, unaware that something extraordinary was about to unfold. On the riverside of the Louvre, a white utility truck rolled up quietly. It looked like any ordinary maintenance vehicle. No one noticed a basket lift attached to it, rising slowly toward a stone balcony. Inside the truck, 3 men sat in silence. Each wore bright orange safety vests, helmets, and dust masks. Their gloves were black, their movements precise. They were not workers. They were thieves. At 9:31 a.m., the first man stepped into the basket. The lift groaned as it climbed the ancient facade of the Louvre. The second man checked his watch. 4 minutes. That was all the time they had planned for. The balcony window had been chosen days earlier. It was old, rarely used, and poorly guarded. The man in the basket pulled out a glass-cutting tool, pressed it against the window pane, and sliced carefully. A soft crack echoed against the stone walls. Inside, the Galerie d'Apollon was silent and golden. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, glinting off jewel crowns and imperial tiaras displayed in glass cases. Every piece told a story of kings, queens, and empires long gone. The leader stepped inside, his boots quiet on the polished floor. He whispered, 2 minutes. The others nodded. From his backpack, he drew an angle grinder. The blade spun with a metallic scream. Sparks rained down as the first display case shattered. Behind the glass lay the crown of Empress Eugenie, diamonds sparkling like frozen fire. He lifted it carefully, wrapping it in a black cloth. The second case fell next. Inside rested a necklace once worn by Queen Marie Amélie, valued at over 20 million euros. The thieves worked fast, their faces calm. Outside, alarms began to flicker on the security screens, but the guards were 2 galleries away. The third man whispered, 30 seconds. The leader nodded, his eyes scanning the display. He saw something glittering deeper in the case, a brooch belonging to Queen Hortense, small but priceless. He reached for it. Then a sound. Footsteps. Someone was coming. The men froze. The echo grew louder, bouncing to the marble hall. A guard, making his routine round earlier than scheduled. The thieves looked at each other. The leader's voice broke the silence, calm but sharp. Go. Now. They ran, jewels clinking softly inside their bags. Down the hall, through the broken window, into the waiting basket lift. The lift descended slowly, painfully slow. Every second stretched like eternity. The guard entered the gallery just as the last thief stepped off the lift. He saw the broken glass, the empty cases, the open window. He shouted, "Stop!" But the truck had already rolled away. It turned onto the river road, vanished into the Paris traffic. Only the faint echo of sirens followed. It was 9:35 a.m. In exactly 4 minutes, jewels worth 88 million euros, about $102 million, had disappeared. The Louvre, one of the most secure museums in the world, had been robbed in daylight. The guard sealed the gallery. The director was called. Police swarmed the area within minutes. But the thieves were gone, leaving behind nothing, except a single crown, dropped on the pavement, its diamonds cracked but gleaming in the sunlight. The city of Paris buzzed with shock. News spread across phones, radios, and televisions. 4-minute heist at the Louvre. It became the headline of the day. But somewhere, across the river, in a hidden garage, the 3 men sat in silence again. The jewels lay on a table under dim yellow light. Each piece glittered coldly, reflecting not beauty, but danger. And as one of them reached for the recovered crown, he noticed something strange. The man's hand trembled slightly. A small chip of diamond had come loose from the crown's frame. He turned it under the light. Something shimmered inside. A tiny metallic, no bigger than a grain of rice. He frowned. "Is this a tracker?" he whispered. The others froze. The leader leaned in, his expression darkening. He took the crown, brought it close to his ear, and heard a faint tick. A pulse, not a clock, A signal, without a word. He grabbed a hammer and smashed a stone. Tiny fragments flew across the floor. Inside, a microtransmitter blinked once and went dark. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then the youngest of the group broke the silence. They are tracking us already. The leader nodded slowly. Then we do what we planned. Phase 2. Outside, sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Helicopters cut across the gray Paris sky. News channels were already showing the Louvre from above. Blue lights flashing, journalists shouting, and a single headline scrolling across every screen. Historic jewel heist at the Louvre. Police launched citywide manhunt. At 10:07 a.m., an unmarked van rolled out of the garage. Inside were 3 black duffel bags. Each carried history worth millions. Each carried risk worth dying for. The van drove south, away from the city center, into the industrial zone near Ivry-sur-Seine. There, in an abandoned warehouse, another man waited. Older, calm, dressed in a dark suit. He had been part of the plan, but not the action. As the van stopped, the thieves stepped out. The leader approached the older man and set one bag at his feet. Everything except the crown. We lost it. The man smiled faintly. I heard. The police found it. Damaged, but still beautiful. His voice was smooth, practiced. You did well. For minutes. No casualties. Paris will talk about this for decades. The youngest thief looked nervous. Then what happens now? The older man opened the bag, his eyes glinting at the sight of diamonds and sapphires. He zipped it closed again. Now, he said softly, we disappear. Meanwhile, back at the Louvre, the director stood in the shattered gallery, surrounded by police and museum staff. The air smelled of dust and burnt metal. The empty display cases gleamed under harsh lights, silent witnesses to humiliation. He pressed his palm to his forehead. How did this happen? He muttered. A detective beside him answered quietly. They came through the riverside, used a truck lift, cut through the window. They were gone before anyone reached this wing. The director's voice broke. But the jewels, these are not just objects. They are our history. Outside, crowds had gathered behind police barriers. Tourists took photos. News vans lined the streets. The world's eyes were on Paris. At 11:23 a.m., the French president's office released a statement calling the theft a blow to national pride and heritage. Across Europe, airports and borders were alerted. Interpol joined the hunt. Security footage was replayed again and again. 3 figures, faces hidden, movements precise. No fingerprints, no DNA, only silence. And somewhere beyond the edges of the city, the 3 thieves watched the news on a flickering screen, their faces lit by the blue glow. The leader whispered, "They will never find us. Not this time." But then, a phone on the table vibrated once. No one had touched it. No one had called. The screen glowed white with a single message. You forgot one piece. The youngest thief stared at it. What does that mean? The leader's expression hardened. He turned toward the bags of jewels and noticed something he had not before. Inside the wrapping of the Queen Marie-Amélie necklace, a faint red light was blinking. The leader's heart pounded. The light blinked again, slow, steady, deliberate. It was not just a reflection. It was a beacon. He ripped open the black cloth, diamonds spilling across the floor like frozen raindrops. Beneath them, glued to the underside of the necklace's clasp, was a tiny red device, no bigger than a coin. It pulsed like a heartbeat. The youngest thief stepped back, panic rising in his chest. They tracked us through this. The leader clenched his jaw. His mind raced. He grabbed the device and slammed it to the ground. The red light flickered, then died. But deep down he knew it was already too late. In the distance, faint at first, came the low thump of rotor blades. Then sirens, closer, louder, relentless. The warehouse walls trembled as a police convoy thundered down the narrow road. The older man in the suit stayed perfectly still. He did not look surprised. In fact, he almost looked pleased. The leader turned to him. You set us up. The man smiled faintly. I did not set you up. I protected the art. You were never supposed to get this far. The youngest thief stared at him, eyes wide. What are you talking about? The man took a step closer, his voice low and cold. These jewels are not only treasures, they are national trackers. Every high-value artifact in that gallery was tagged by the Ministry of Culture years ago. It was only a matter of time. He slipped a small earpiece into his ear and whispered, "They are here." Outside, police floodlights cut through the night. Helicopters hovered overhead. Voices shouted through megaphones. "Drop your weapons and surrender. You are surrounded." The leader's hands tightened around the duffel bag. He looked at his team, panic in their eyes, disbelief on their faces. He knew there was no escape this time. But he also knew something the older man did not. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded map, a blueprint of the Louvre, marked in red ink. At the bottom, a symbol, a serpent coiled around a crown. He whispered, almost to himself, this was never about the jewels. The police lights burst through the windows. Glass shattered. Shouts filled the air. The thieves dropped to the ground as armed officers stormed in. The older man raised his hand slowly, but the leader just smiled, because in that moment, as chaos erupted, he noticed something strange. The duffel bag that held the Queen Hortense brooch was gone. It had vanished. Far away, across the city, a woman in a black coat stepped off a motorcycle. She removed her helmet, revealing dark eyes and a calm smile. In her gloved hand, she held the brooch, small, perfect, shining under the streetlights. She whispered softly, "Phase 3 begins now." The camera of a nearby CCTV blinked red, recording her face, and in the control room of the Paris police, a technician leaned forward. "Sir, we have movement near the river." The commander turned toward the screen. "Zoom in." The image sharpened, and for the first time since the heist began, they saw her face. The woman looked straight into the camera and smiled. The technician's breath caught. She looked straight at the camera. "Sir, she knows we are watching." The commander stepped closer to the screen. Her expression, her posture, it was deliberate, calculated. This was no random thief. He ordered, "Trace her route." "Where does that street lead?" The operator replied, "Rue de University, near the river, less than 2 kilometers from the Louvre." The commander's eyes narrowed. She is taking the same path the others used to escape. Meanwhile, the woman walked calmly along the cobblestone street. The morning fog had begun to lift, revealing the gray shimmer of the Seine. Traffic hummed faintly in the distance. In her hand, the brooch caught the pale sunlight and scattered it like shards of glass. She stopped near a narrow alley, where an old bookshop stood tucked between cafes. Its wooden sign read, "Librairie du Temps Perdu, the bookshop of lost time." She entered. The bell above the door chimed softly. Inside, the air smelled of paper, dust, and something faintly metallic. A man sat behind the counter, reading a worn copy of Les Miserables. He did not look up. He simply said, "You are late." The woman placed the brooch on the counter. Phase 2 failed. They were caught. The man closed his book. That was the plan. He turned the brooch over in his hand, revealing a hidden hinge at the back. With a delicate click, the piece opened. Inside was a thin sheet of gold foil, etched with numbers and coordinates. The woman frowned. "This is not about the jewels, is it?" The man smiled faintly. "No, the jewels were never the prize. They were the key." He held the foil up to the light. The numbers shimmered faintly, forming a map outline, not of Paris, but of southern France, near Avignon. At the center of the coordinates, a single word was engraved: tomb. Back at the warehouse, police surrounded the scene. Officers dragged the 3 captured thieves outside. Flashlights flickered. Cameras snapped. The media was already calling it the heist of the century. The leader, still calm despite the handcuffs, kept his gaze low. A detective approached him. "Where are the others? Who is the woman?" The leader smiled faintly. His lips moved slowly, deliberately. "She is not part of the crew," he said. "She is the one who hired us." The detective's eyes widened. What was she after? The leader looked up. His expression was almost proud. She was after what lies beneath the Louvre. The detective blinked. Beneath? The leader nodded. Deep under the museum, below the galleries, below the old foundations, there is something that should never have been found. The detective leaned closer. What are you talking about? But the leader did not answer. He just whispered one last phrase before being taken away. The key has already been delivered. That night, as Paris tried to sleep, a storm rolled in from the west. Thunder echoed through the streets. And in the little bookshop near the Seine, the woman and the old man packed their things. The brooch was gone. The gold foil had been burned to ash. The man looked out the window, rain streaking the glass. He said softly, "Tomorrow, the world will remember the robbery, but no one will understand what was truly stolen." The woman picked up her black helmet, her voice calm and final. "They will soon enough." Outside, lightning flashed over the Louvre. The museum stood silent, wounded but proud. Deep below its marble floors, unseen by anyone, something ancient stirred. A distant rumble rolled through the tunnels beneath the Louvre. It sounded like thunder at first, but it came from the ground, not the sky, deep below the museum's lowest sublevel, past sealed corridors and forgotten catacombs. A metal door trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The faint vibration traveled up through the stone foundations until it reached the floor of the Galerie d'Apollon, where the robbery had begun. Upstairs, in the empty hall, security lights flickered one by one. A motion sensor activated for half a second, then shut down again. No one noticed. At 3:12 a.m., the Louvre was still under heavy police control. Investigators studied shattered glass and security footage. The director stood by the window, staring out at the storm, a glass of water untouched in his hand. An officer entered quietly. "Sir," he said, "we have confirmation. The woman from the footage. She is real, but her identity does not exist in any database. No passport, no record, no match." The director turned slowly. "What about the older man?" "Same thing," the officer said. "We checked facial recognition, immigration logs, even Interpol. It is as if they do not exist." The director's expression hardened. He looked down at the broken cases, the empty pedestals, and whispered, "Then this is not just theft. This is a message." Meanwhile, across the city, the woman rode her motorcycle through the rain-soaked streets, heading south out of Paris. The headlights cut through mist as she crossed the Pont de Sèvres bridge. In her jacket pocket was a small black box, no larger than a matchbook. It emitted a faint hum. Inside it, something glowed softly like a pulse. At 4:05 a.m., she reached the outskirts of the city. The road stretched into open countryside. She stopped by a deserted gas station, killed the engine, and removed her helmet. Rain dripped from her hair. She opened the box again and stared at the light. It was not a jewel. It was not gold or diamond. It was a fragment of stone, engraved with symbols older than any known language. Tiny, precise, almost mathematical. The old man's voice echoed in her mind. It was buried under the Louvre, before the museum was ever built, before Napoleon, before Paris itself became what it is. The jewels were the disguise. The real treasure was hidden beneath them. She placed a fragment on the dashboard of her bike, took a breath, and whispered, "Now it begins." Far behind her, in the Louvre's control room, a technician noticed something strange on the energy monitors. A single reading, a surge of electromagnetic activity, rising from the museum's lowest sublevel. "Sir, we have movement underground," he said. The commander frowned. "What kind of movement?" The technician stared at the screen. "Not people. Something else. It is expanding." Beneath the Louvre, the metal door began to glow faintly from its seams. Symbols carved into its surface lit up one by one, like a language awakening after centuries of silence. And as the storm above raged, a deep, low hum filled the tunnels. It grew louder, deeper, alive. The ancient door shuddered, then began to open. The sound of stone grinding against stone echoed through the catacombs. Dust swirled through the stale air like smoke. Beneath the Louvre, where no visitor had ever walked, the metal door split down the middle with a slow, agonizing groan. From within came a dim, pulsing light, not bright, not natural. It flickered like a heartbeat, steady and slow, as if something alive waited behind it. Inside the control room above, monitors began to distort. Static danced across the security feeds. One by one, the cameras in the lower levels went black. The technician's voice trembled. "Sir, we lost visuals below sublevel 5. The commander leaned over him, his tone sharp. "Was anyone down there?" The technician shook his head. "No one. Those tunnels were sealed since the restoration in 1998. The commander stared at the screen, then at the Louvre's blueprint spread across the table. "There's no sublevel 5 on this map," he said slowly. Silence filled the room. Beneath their feet, the door creaked open wider. A gust of air rushed out, dry, ancient, and heavy with the scent of rust and stone. Inside the chamber, rows of marble pillars stretched into darkness, and carved into the far wall was a symbol, a serpent coiled around a crown, the same mark that had appeared on the thief's map. Meanwhile, miles away, the woman in the black coat rode through the countryside, her motorcycle's engine cutting through the storm. The fragment of stone in her pocket grew warmer, its glow deepening with every kilometer. She did not need a map. The fragment was guiding her, pulsing faster as she neared her destination. At 5:41 a.m., she stopped on a narrow rural road outside Avignon. In front of her stood the ruins of an old monastery, half buried under ivy and moss. Lightning illuminated its crumbling towers for just a moment, revealing faded carvings of crowns and serpents on its gates. She dismounted slowly, removed her gloves, and approached the entrance. The door was locked, but when she placed the glowing fragment against the stone, the lock clicked open by itself. A low vibration passed through the ground. The storm seemed to pause, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Inside, the monastery was silent. Long corridors stretched into shadow, lined with ancient paintings and relics. At the center stood an altar of black marble. On it, an engraving read, "Custodes Regni, Guardians of the Crown." The woman reached into her jacket, pulling out a small silver key. She inserted it into a hidden slot beneath the altar. A mechanism clicked. The altar shifted, revealing a staircase spiraling downward. She hesitated for a moment, then descended into the darkness. Back in Paris, the commander received a call. "Sir, satellite imagery just picked something up," an officer said. "Energy readings near Avignon. Same pattern as the surge beneath the Louvre." The commander's eyes widened. "Send everything we have. She is heading there." But by the time the helicopters left Paris, she was already deep underground, walking through a corridor lined with statues of faceless kings. At the end of the passage, a vast stone chamber opened before her, and in the center of it, a golden sarcophagus rested on a pedestal. Symbols identical to those on the Louvre's ancient door glowed faintly across its surface. She stepped closer, the glow from the fragment in her hand matching the symbols on the sarcophagus. She placed it into a hollow slot at the top. The ground shook. The lid began to move, slowly, impossibly heavy, sliding open on its own. A rush of air poured out, cold and dry. Inside lay not a body, but an object wrapped in crimson cloth. She reached forward and pulled the cloth away. Beneath it was a crown, ancient and blackened by time, its jewels dark, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. She whispered, "After 5 centuries, the crown of shadows." A faint whisper filled the air, not a voice from her own mind, something older, something awake. And then she heard it clearly from the darkness around her. "Welcome back, Air the Serpent." The woman froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The voice was not an echo. It was present, circling her, as if the walls themselves were speaking. The torchlight flickered. Her shadow twisted unnaturally on the floor, stretching long and sharp against the stone. She forced herself to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The answer came like a sigh through centuries of dust. "I am the Guardian, bound to the crown until the Serpent rises again." Her pulse quickened. She glanced around the chamber. The carvings on the walls seemed to move now, shifting under the dim light, depicting scenes of war, betrayal, and kingdoms falling into darkness. The crown still sat before her, but now it pulsed faintly, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. She stepped closer. Her reflection shimmered across its surface, distorted, and for a brief second, she saw someone else staring back at her. A man wearing armor from another age, his eyes glowing faint gold. Then he was gone. She exhaled sharply, backing away. "What is this?" she demanded. "Why was it hidden beneath the Louvre?" The voice replied, calm and heavy with old sorrow. "Because men once died to bury it, and others will die to find it again." Above ground, the first rays of dawn began to break through the clouds. In the ruins above the monastery, the air shimmered faintly, distortion spreading outward like ripples in water, miles away in Paris. Alarms triggered at the Louvre once more. All monitors blinked back to life, except one. Camera 37, the one closest to the underground door, remained dead. The commander watched as the other feeds stabilized. Then, from the black screen of camera 37, a faint image began to appear. A silhouette, standing in front of the sealed vault, motionless. The technician frowned. That cannot be live footage, sir. The vault is locked." The commander leaned closer. The figure on the screen turned its head slowly, as if aware of being watched. And then the lights in the control room flickered once, and the feed went dark again. Back in the monastery, the woman carefully lifted the crown from its pedestal. It was heavier than gold, its weight pressing into her hands like gravity itself. When her fingers touched the inner rim, a surge of cold energy shot through her arms. Visions flashed before her eyes, ancient battlefields, burning castles, crowds kneeling before a shadowed throne. She gasped and stumbled backward, dropping to her knees as the images faded. Her breathing was ragged. Her hands trembled, but she smiled. "The prophecy was true," she whispered. "The crown still remembers." She wrapped it carefully and placed it inside a reinforced case. Then, climbing the staircase, she emerged into the pale morning light. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message with a single line of text. "Delivery location confirmed. 9 a.m. sharp." She closed the message, started her motorcycle, and sped off down the wet road, leaving the silent monastery behind. But as she disappeared into the distance, the stone altar below began to move again. The stairs sealed shut, and a deep rumble echoed through the earth. Far below, in the darkness of the buried chamber, the crown's pedestal still glowed faintly, and from within the stone walls, something shifted. A crack appeared across one of the statues, the one shaped like a faceless king, and from that crack, a thin stream of black dust began to rise. The black dust curled upward like smoke, twisting through the cracks in the ancient stone. It moved with purpose, as though it remembered where it was going. Deep in the darkness of the sealed chamber, a low hum began to build. It started faint, like the vibration of a cello string, then grew louder, rattling the pillars and shaking loose centuries of dust. The statue split further, its stone surface flaking away like dry skin. Beneath it was not rock, but armor, black, smooth, and glimmering faintly under the dim light. A pair of eyes opened within the stone. They glowed with the same golden hue that the woman had seen in her reflection. A voice, colder than the catacomb air, whispered, "The air has awakened me. The crown will return to the throne." Above ground, the woman raced through the countryside. Her motorcycle speedometer read 186 kilometers per hour. Rain lashed her visor, and thunder rolled across the hills. The case containing the crown sat strapped behind her, and with every flash of lightning, it glimmered faintly, a pulse of gold leaking through the metal. Her destination was clear, a private airstrip near Nîmes, where a black jet awaited under a hangar roof. She arrived at 8:47 a.m. Two men in dark suits approached her as she dismounted. One held a briefcase, the other a scanner. "Do you have the artifact?" one of them asked, his French accent sharp and clipped. She nodded. "Condition stable. But I need containment within the next hour. It is not dormant anymore." The man frowned. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, the case trembled violently. A muffled hum came from inside, the same tone that had awakened below the Louvre. All three stepped back instinctively. The scanner beeped uncontrollably, lights flashing red. "Energy levels are surging," shouted the second man. "This is off the scale." Suddenly, a wave of pressure burst outward, shattering the scanner and sending a ripple through the air. Every metal object nearby, wrenches, tools, the plane stairs, rose half an inch off the ground, then clattered back down. For a moment, no one moved. Then the woman exhaled slowly and said, "It has recognized movement. It knows it is being moved again." The men exchanged uneasy looks. "Madam," one said, "who exactly are we delivering this to?" Her expression hardened. "The same people who ordered the Louvre robbery. But they do not understand what they have unleashed." She turned and began walking toward the jet. But just as she reached the stairs, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Abort mission. Do not let the crown leave France." Satellite scan detects anomaly. Coordinates. The ruins. Return immediately. Her heart sank. She looked back at the monastery in the distant hills, now hidden under the morning fog. And then a low rumble rolled across the ground. The earth trembled. Every bird in the sky scattered at once. From the direction of the ruins, a black column of smoke began to rise, not like fire, more like ash spiraling upward in a perfect shape, straight into the clouds. The two men turned, staring. "What is that?" The woman whispered. "It is too late. The guardian has awakened." The case behind her began to hum again, this time louder, a deep vibration that shook her bones. The latches popped open by themselves. A golden light spilled out from within, bright and blinding, illuminating the hangar like a miniature sun. And from inside, the crown of shadows rose slowly into the air, turning on its own axis, the jewels burning with inner fire. The men fell to their knees, shielding their faces. The woman stared in disbelief. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "No, not yet. You cannot awaken fully." Then a whisper echoed through the hangar, the same voice that had spoken in the chamber beneath the Louvre. "The air carries my seal. The throne awaits its king." Suddenly, the crown shot forward, a streak of golden energy, and struck her in the chest. Light engulfed everything. The hangar trembled. Alarms blared. Then silence. When the light faded, she was gone. Only her motorcycle remained, its engine still humming softly. And the case, now empty, lay open on the ground. The crown was no longer there. The sun began to rise over the quiet countryside of southern France. The storm had passed, leaving behind only stillness and a trail of unanswered questions. At the Louvre, the commander stood once again before the sealed underground door. Technicians worked silently around him, their screens showing strange readings, patterns of energy, like heartbeats buried beneath the earth. He placed a hand on the cold metal surface. It was still warm, as if something below was alive. From his earpiece, a voice broke through the static. "Sir," the woman's tracker went offline. No sign of her, no trace of the artifact. "The airstrip is empty." He did not respond for several seconds. His eyes drifted to the ancient symbol carved into the vault, the serpent coiled around a crown. Then he spoke, quietly, almost himself. History is repeating itself. Outside, tourists began to gather at the museum gates, unaware of the events that had unfolded beneath their feet. The Louvre gleamed under the Paris morning light, its glass pyramid reflecting the golden sunrise, calm, elegant, eternal, but in one of its shadowed corridors. A single painting had changed overnight. The eyes of the king in the portrait now glowed faintly gold, and if one looked closely, A dark crown could be seen, resting faintly upon his head, a crown that had not been there before. The story of the Louvre robbery faded from the news within days, replaced by politics, celebrities, and new distractions. But beneath the calm surface of Paris, ancient power had awakened once more, watching, waiting for the right moment to rise again. The crown of shadows had found its heir, and the world, though it did not yet know it, would soon remember that some legends are not myths. They are warnings,